Welcome back to Deal Flow. Ryan right here as always. The SBA GOAT of Twitter himself, Matthias, is on the podcast. How's it going, man?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on here. I don't know if I'd call myself a goat, but I'll definitely take the compliment. So
Well, if you look at kind of the buckets of SMB Twitter, you got Clint, who's probably the top name on the broker advisor side. You got SMB attorney, for the M&A attorneys. I mean, maybe there's an account that I don't know. You tweet a lot, so maybe it's just I see your tweets a lot, but your account
yeah,
for the lending has to be way up there.
yeah. Among people, I would say myself, probably Bruce Marks, Ray Drew with Fund X Solutions, and then a few other people like Lisa Forrest. So
Okay, and so I know you've briefly told your story on other podcasts, but give us the 30-second background of where you were and why you are on Twitter so prolifically.
yeah, for sure, Ryan. Yeah, I have 30-second background as brief as I can be. So worked in the SBA space for 7 years in middle office, kind of loan closing, fulfillment roles, basically coordinating the process from the time a loan would get approved through closing and funding. Was at Live Oak Bank for about half a year back in 2021. Worked there as a closer, basically overseeing the process from the time a deal would get approved through closing. Was at Byline Bank, another top five nationally ranked SBA lender. Was there for about 3.5 years, both before and after Byline Bank, or sorry, both before and after Live Oak Bank, and then worked at two banks in Madison, Wisconsin, or in Wisconsin, one based in Madison, the other one based in Milwaukee, and basically got connected to the SMB Twitter system or space the day that I joined my last bank from an attorney that I worked with at Byline and Live Oak named Scott Oliver. Started basically making connections on Twitter with business buyers and making referrals to my last employer, First Business Bank, from these people that is being on Twitter. Sent them a ton of referrals from all these folks on Twitter. Basically, stepped into a bear trap with my bank's compliance and marketing department by making the mistake of retweeting a tweet from my bank. And then basically got told when I got to my 2 month review that I had to either get off of Twitter or stop posting about banking, SB, and acquisitions unless I wanted to vet my stuff by them first, which I disagreed with. So shortly after that, while on a vacation in Europe and Greece specifically for 2 weeks with my wife, just decided that, here's this ETA market very much in its infancy and its precipice on SMB Twitter. And I wanted to be a part of it. And I realized if I stay at my bank, I'd have to remove myself from it, Twitter specifically, which I did not want to do. So I thought, here's a market. I understand very well what profile of deals these banks want to fund based on the buyer background, the deal economics, debt service coverage, equity composition, other factors. And then banks, typically, with the exception of Wells Fargo, will pay finder's fees to firms like mine for referring deals to them. So I thought, market, skill set, revenue model, let's get to work and find a way to help these searchers. So
No, it's awesome. It's so fascinating because I'll be 42 years. I'm 38, be 39 this year. For most of my career, what I did was not really something to talk about on Twitter. I mean, I guess you could have, but no one would have cared. But I was in the SMB space. Then when I sold that company, started this company, did a few things, and so now I've really enjoyed being a part of the SMB community because for my core, what I do, finding off-market deals, has led me into some of this SBA stuff. But there's so much just information and value out there. My son's 16, he's homeschooling now, he's learning stuff, and I was like, man, God, what would it be like to be, 15 years younger, understanding that you can go find a career path on Twitter, learn not everything, but enough to get you started down the path. And so I do wonder, 20 years from now, how that shakes out, if big corporations will loosen the standards, or if they kind of like it this way, which is, yeah, we keep a tight rein here. You can go out and refer us a bunch of business and we're still making good money, but no one knew that we used you to make the money, right?
yeah, no, yeah, definitely interesting. And in all honesty, Ryan, too, like it's kind of serendipitous. It worked out favorably. I mean, had I not stumbled across Twitter, in all likelihood, I mean, there was a good chance that I'd either one be a closer at an SBA bank, or two maybe be a lender, business development officer, perhaps a different bank. Most likely not the bank that I was at, just since I wasn't a good culture fit there, honestly. But yeah, I think as the times evolve and as social media develops, and more business comes through it, you're basically going to have two cohorts of SBA banks and financial institutions, the ones that embrace it and find a way to utilize it to make money and adapt to it, and ones that don't. And honestly, I think that, the ones that don't, they're going to get left to the wayside or bought out, and they're going to lose some of the creative people like myself.
Okay, so let's talk about searchers because it's an interesting term, but it's an interesting spot in the world. And there's a lot of we talk about some on this podcast about what searchers should go after. And the current question that I'm asking myself, and this is what I think you can probably lend a lot of credence and credibility to the conversation is it or should maybe is it easier or should we be trying to get searchers to look for less than the 1 million EBITDA deal, or trying to help business owners grow to 1 million EBITDA? And I've got the reason I asked the question is, as someone who generates off-market deal flow, the levers that someone like me can pull versus a searcher, I have a huge advantage against them, right? So if we're going to the same business, I can put them from a sell side group, I can put them in maybe a small private equity, other searchers, and I find that the searchers struggle sometimes to compete in that 1 to 2 million EBITDA business. But then I find the
Yeah.
guys that are doing, 300, $450,000 and whatever, they really want to sell, but they can't, but getting them up there is tough. So what should we be doing about this problem? Because to me, solving this problem is deal flow for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So the questions I understand, just to make sure I can answer accordingly, Ryan, is like, what can we do to make it so searchers pursue the sub-million EBITDA deals, and also that
Yeah, I
like
rephrase it. Yeah. Should we
yeah.
encourage more searchers to search below 1 million, or
Yeah.
try to figure out how to encourage 1 million businesses to grow to 1 million? So which side should we be targeting in this
Yeah.
space so more deals can get done?
So I would take the searcher side, and I think, in all honesty, this is a fantastic question, Ryan, and Kev, colorful comment here. Is I think searchers should be pursuing the smaller deals for a couple different reasons. Is one, you're going up against less competition on the sub-million-dollar deals, and the multiple is going to be lower. Whereas once you get to around that threshold, the multiple can flip to high fours, fives, or even higher, depending on the industry. And you just all of a sudden are going up against a lot more competition. And as far as the structuring the deal goes, that's when you typically run up against deals that are listed by investment banks, ones on Axial. You're going up against strategics and private equity groups or financial buyers. And all of a sudden, you have to have a lot more equity to make the deal work, which, if you aren't coming from a wealthy background or a committed equity pool of capital with a strong personal balance sheet, you're going to have to go and raise that equity and then find a way to make a good debt structure work on it such that you can attract favorable investors.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. That's what I've been arguing with. I try to talk to searchers about regularly. It's like, hey, look for something smaller. And from your SBA experience though, maybe I'm crazy, but if you are going after a smaller deal, we'll just use that term, you go buy that deal, you get the ops cleaned up, you get the sales done, you grow that business. When you go buy that second business, you want to expand because you used SBA the first time. Um, the way that those loans work, it's going to be easy to acquire, easier theoretically to acquire that second business because the way the SBA incentivizes you to buy similar type businesses, right?
Yeah, correct, Ryan. So if you buy a business and it's the same industry, like the exact same 6-digit NAICS code, the exact same ownership group is deal number one. So same people, same ownership percentages. So for example, you, Ryan, owning 100% of HVAC company or whatnot in the same geography, which is subjective. And I've seen that interpreted different ways. Some banks like it same geography as same state. Others, it's like, 2.5 hour drive. That's kind of where it's more of an art than a science. But back to your question, once you have the platform meaning the initial business for those not familiar with the terminology, and then you want to buy the second business in the same industry, as long as it's in the same geography, same ownership group, you can use 100% financing between the SBA bank and the seller's note, presuming that you're buying it at a multiple such that cash flows accordingly. And in that circumstance, too, just to add one more comment for the purpose of the listeners, is the existing company that you own is going to have to come in as either a co-borrower or corporate guarantor, meaning that's going to be tied into the debt for the subsequent acquisition.
Exactly. Yeah, I do. I wonder if we'll see more of that strategy get rolled out um, in the future. And you can do it with bigger deals. I saw someone the other day talking about a back-to-back $5 million deal on Twitter. I can't remember who that was. Was that you talking about? They double dipped. They went in five, and they went and got a second five. Was that Lisa? Maybe.
Yes, there's talk, and I honestly I've gone through the SBA standard operating procedures. I can't find the exact section where it mentions this, so it might be somewhere in the procedural notices. There's talk, and I confirmed this with Lisa Forrest in person at the Harvard ETA conference last October, that you can do 5 million that you PG in multiple industries if it's different NAICS codes. Now, with that being said, Ryan, I'm someone where I'm kind of a see it and believe it person,
Hmm.
where once someone's actually done it and they've proven they've done it, like I'm on the train that I'm gonna believe it.
Hmm.
But let's just say it, it is a thing, and I believe it is a thing due to the fact that Lisa said it is a thing and she's a
Sure.
trustworthy source in the
Absolutely.
industry. Is I think if you think about if you're a bank or you're a senior lender deploying debt leverage for one of these acquisitions, if you think about the margin, everyone has 24 hours a day, right? Like me, you, Ryan, Elon Musk, Joe Biden, basically everyone. And at the end of the day, you only have so many hours to run a business. So unless you're having an operating partner, general manager running these different companies, you're getting stretched thin and pulled in different directions. So if you're a bank, if you're thinking about this in the margin, say you extend 5 million to Matthias with Pioneer Capital Advisory, or like Matthias to buy Pioneer Capital Advisory, and he's running that company, and then he comes back to you, he says, "Hey, I want to buy Jane's HVAC down the street." Well, all of a sudden your attention is getting split between two different companies. So I think even if it is allowed, and I'm operating under the presumption that it is, it's going to be hard to get banks on board with it for that reason, if that makes sense.
No, yeah. That makes perfect sense. Okay, so a couple. We I know we're about 7 minutes here, so a couple, maybe I don't know, rapid fire, if you will. I've got a theory that I'm on record saying that we everybody talks about the silver tsunami, but I'm guessing 5, 7, 8 years, kind of put that caveat, less than a decade, we'll call it, that we're going to have a wave of businesses where the ETA model, too many people got in, and you're going to find a lot of
Mm-hmm.
businesses that are going to be discounted or good for good prices, 5 to 8 years from now, because people they thought they wanted to do it, they went in, they realized
Mm-hmm.
that just because it's $1 million heap of business doesn't mean a whole lot when times get tough. And they're like, you know what? I want to go back to the W-2 life, or whatever it is. How likely you think that is to play out?
Yeah, I honestly think that's an interesting thesis. I haven't thought about that before. I mean, I can see places where that will hold true. Like there have been people on Twitter, and I think there was someone on Will Smith's Acquiring Minds podcast where essentially they went in, didn't really think a whole lot about the management plan, and essentially it's been like hell in a handbasket disaster scenario. I think people that are walking into situations that are going to become distress, either due to one buying it with too thin debt service coverage, and or potentially they just are poor manager types, like they haven't thought about enough about the actual operating of the business and just getting the deal done. I think that those could end up turning into distress sales, whether those get taken back by the bank and then they try to put some type of a receiver into it, and or if they do some fire sale with a broker. But as far as like, let's just say hypothetically that you or I, Ryan, was to buy one of these businesses, or like a more competent searcher, and just to kind of give the benefit of the doubt that way directionally, I think if you grow the business or if you maintain it at steady state, and like assuming that you can survive the J curve to get to the other side and to get to like a steady run rate revenue scenario, I think those businesses, when people exit them, unless there's a reason that it's kind of a distressed sale and buyers sniff blood in the water, I think the multiple is not necessarily going to be compressed. If anything, I would actually take the counter to that. That if you think about supply and demand with economics, with all these buyers flooding into ETA, that said seller, even if they were an ETA buyer 5 years ago, and we'll just call that time period zero, like now, I think the multiple will remain the same, if not be higher. Especially if you look at the fact that if you go on the Atlanta Fed interest rate like market probability graph, it looks like SOFR and rates are expected to drop 200 basis points by 2026, somewhere around there, plus minus. So if you think about it as debt is cheaper, you can buy more business, and I think that's going to drive multiples up. I know I kind of rambled there. Not sure if that
No,
helps.
no, that's yeah, it's just a thesis that's kind of sprung on
Yeah.
me. Um, so one of the things, what do you? I tell you my thought. The biggest thing you work with searchers who are probably further along than I do. The problem that I see with searchers not being able to acquire deals is they're not generating enough leads. I don't think they take the deal flow origination process as seriously as they should. That's what I see, which is preventing searchers from buying companies. What's the biggest problem that you see?
Yeah, so I would say one is either lack of transferable experience and they go into Twitter, they see people tweeting about running these companies, they see pictures of HVAC vehicles or whatnot, and they get super excited. And lots of them, I guess, talking about like the younger ones, right? They might be 2 years into working in investment banking, and all of a sudden they see people tweeting on videos of their interviews and acquiring minds, and they want to go do this. Is they haven't thought enough about actually running the business and the skills involved in that. And take for example, if you're going from being a 25-year-old investment banker in Boston to managing a landscaping company in Florida with lots of blue collar type labor, nothing against blue collar labor, but you're going from that one background and one geography to something on the complete other side of the country. I think that from an operational management standpoint, people don't talk about that enough and what all is involved in that. And then back to your point and kept question earlier, Ryan, on the smaller businesses, if you're buying something without a GM involved, and if you're expecting to be very operationally involved, that's essentially, a skill set of human capital and understanding how to manage people, which lots of people don't have unless they've done it before. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, no, that's yeah, it is what it is. I do find that the searchers this isn't a search on this isn't a bash on searchers. I hope it comes off as like trying to help searchers acquire more deals, right? Is I've seen some searchers who come and they will be very almost robotic in how they want to pitch a seller. And
Yeah.
that's, I think I said this podcast is when I talk to a seller, it's a redneck to redneck, very low key, very conversational, kind of like when you're talking.
Yeah.
I try to never bring up the term EBITDA. Almost, I mean, it has to be a good sized company. And I talk to a lot bigger companies than what searchers are going after. And they don't know. I mean, I talked to a guy yesterday. He's 62, built the business, had it 30 years, is doing $30 million. He doesn't know what the term EBITDA means. So if you think you're going to go into a searcher,
30 million in revenue or
yeah,
EBITDA that you said
no, 30
previously?
million in revenue. Sorry. He
Okay.
didn't know what EBITDA. He's like, yeah. He started. I wasn't going to bring it up. He started giving me all his financials. I said, oh, well, do you know your EBITDA? He goes, what? I said, your EBITDA. He goes, I have no idea what that is. I said, oh, never mind, forget it.
Right.
He's running a $30 million business. He didn't even heard the term. So,
Yeah.
the likelihood that you're going to get on there and kind of jargon them to death, I think that plays against them early on. Now you got to figure that stuff out, of course, through the process. But first time
Right.
call, it's high level information. Make them feel like, and I always advise searchers, they have what you want. Go in showing that respect. Hey,
Yeah.
wow, this is great. You've done a great job. Appreciate what they have because it's what you're trying to acquire.
And one adjacent comment to that, Ryan, is one thing searchers have that I think a lot of them don't necessarily play to or lean on is they aren't private equity, right? Like you're an individual going and you want to buy a business. And the less you make yourself look like and or come across as private equity, the better it is going to be for you because it's going to be less scary, less intimidating, and less robotic for the seller. Because lots of these private equity buyers, when they're buying one of these companies, they want to use the cash at closing plus rolled equity and or earnout structure, whereby you as the seller essentially could get more, could get less based on how financial performance goes post acquisition. Not to kind of go down too far down that rabbit hole, but as an SBA buyer, you're bringing a completely different value proposition to them, which is You're going to go in, you're going to give them lots of cash at closing, help them take their chips out the table. They're only likely going to be involved for up to a year after closing if you're doing a complete buyout, or if they're doing rollover equity, you have a defined purchase price. But yeah, the more personable and the less institutional you can be in your pitch, the better it is going to be for you as a buyer.
All right, Matthias, we're going to link to your Twitter in the show notes. That's where all your stuff's at. Pioneer Capital will link to that as well. People can follow you there for more great stuff for searchers and SBA lending and all the stuff you got going on, man. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on here.